So, Fox in the UK is showing Legion, which is playing on FX in the US.
I did not realise this was a cable show when I came to watch it.
Okay, so FX is ran by John Landgraf, who Matt and I were in the presence of a few years ago in
Edinburgh.
Just
because Gary's not here, you don't have to forget everything.
He chatted to Jay Hunt, who's the controller of Channel 4, and he coined a phrase that all the US critics I follow on Twitter use on an almost daily basis. It was John Landgraf that coined the phrase peak TV, and peak TV means there is too much television or too much good television for people to watch. On his network alone, he has things like American Crime Story,
American Horror Story,
The Americans. He's cornered the market on that genre there, but we love The Americans. Fargo. Now, the connection to Fargo is that Noah Hawley, who wrote and directed all episodes of Fargo Series 1 and 2, has come up with this. It's a spin-off from X-Men, and it's called Legion, and
it's sort of I would say it's almost like I was reading about it, a bit of it last night, doing a bit of research, and it's almost like a side story. They don't call it a spin-off.
No,
it's sort of more of a side story, and a companion piece would be a more accurate depiction.
So Noah Hawley's got a third Fargo coming out, which is actually
with Ewan McGregor.
They've got an amazing cast. I'm so looking forward to it. The thing is, I always annoy myself because Fargo is turned out to be one of my favourite shows, but because I always come to it late, I never get to write about it. But it is brilliant, and this. I only watched this because all the US critics I like and respect were going, yeah, this is really interesting and really, really fun.
And an FX thing, and the
Fargo
being
connection. FX and the Fargo connection because I trust him and I know his
sort of style. The lead actress, apparently. I mean, I only watched the first episode of Fargo
she was in Rachel Keller plays the lead actress. She was in the second series of Fargo as one of my favourite characters. It also has a British connection in that Downton Abbey's Dan Stevens plays the lead here.
Yeah, a completely unrecognisable Dan Stevens, I would say. I didn't realise it was him.
Yeah.
Can I just read this?
There's also Aubrey Plaza, who I love from Parks. There's so many good people in this. Gene Smart turns up.
It's a universal parallel to the X-Men films, where the US government is in the early days of being aware that something called mutants exists, but the public is not. Talking to John Landgraf, again, just reading round some of the things, apparently when Noah Hawley first wrote this, it was sort of more coherent, the plot was sort of more standard,
A to B to C,
A to B to C,
to F,
and what happened was that Landgraf said, no, we want something a bit more freeform. I think I've seen like 4 of the 6 sort of main X-Men films and 1 of the Wolverine films. What is your sort of relationship with?
None.
Yeah, and you haven't really watched any
I know they are a thing.
Any of the Marvel comic book movies?
No, Gary recommended Daredevil, never seen it, never saw Jessica Jones, never seen Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
The lead character, as we said, Dan Stevens, he plays David Haller, who, we don't know this yet, but the character is the son of Charles Xavier, who is the leader of the X-Men. Basically, in this, he's been diagnosed, or he thinks he's paranoid schizophrenic, so he spends a lot of time in mental institutions. One of these institutions meets, what was the actress's name again? Rachel Keller. Syd Barrett. Now, Syd Barrett is Pink Floyd, isn't it?
And he did go mad. He did have schizophrenia and kill himself.
Again, she thinks she's got a disorder, but it turns out we sort of know her power is that she can, if you touch her skin, isn't it? Skin to skin. She inhabits you, and you inhabit her.
It's kind of the opposite of Pushing Daisies, and sort of
I was
with the
Parent
Trap.
Yeah. You mentioned Aubrey Plaza.
She's
playing
brilliant. I loved
Lenny Busker, who, again, an interesting side note, Noah Hawley originally wrote the character as a middle-aged man, and then he changed the character to, Aubrey Plaza, late 20s, early 30s?
Yeah.
But she told him not to change any of the dialogue that he wrote as the middle-aged man. So
I loved her just hanging around in a wheelchair for no reason.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, though. They haven't really changed the character, so she's almost playing like this old-fashioned, all of her lines and stuff. And basically, it sort of jumps time periods. A lot of it is set in this sort of swimming pool setting where David is being questioned by a character who's simply known as the Interrogator, who's played here by Hamish Linklater. And we get the impression that there's people questioning him. You get the sort of, he doesn't know he's got powers, but we're aware of his powers sort of thing. Gradually, it sort of builds up to the ending where he escapes this sort of, where he's being held, and he joins the team of, we assume, are mutants, led by, as you said, Jean Smart. But
this had everything in it that I shouldn't like. The jumping time periods, the mystery, the superheroes, the very
so much over-stylized of it, like the uniforms that they wear in psychiatric wards. Sort of
it had everything in it that if I had a checklist of things I don't like in a drama, this covered them all, and I absolutely was enthralled. I thought it was brilliant.
Because you like Noah Hawley's writing, because you were a massive fan of Fargo. So. I could never get into it, really. I really struggled with this. If we weren't watching it for the podcast, I think I would have given up on it. Right. I got into it as it went on, as I sort of understood it more. I liked certain elements of it, but again, I'm not a big fan of the sort of like freak, because a lot of it was sort of jumping in. You didn't know where you were. No. It didn't grab me. The best things about it were Dan Stevens, who I thought was absolutely brilliant. I didn't know it was him at all. Having watched Downton Abbey, I still didn't recognise him at all. And I think he's proved himself to be a very versatile actor. And again, as you said, Aubrey Plaza, Rachel Keller, all the performances really good. I mean, it was good, but the narrative of it, I found it very sort of staccato. It sort of got more sort of standard as it went on, and you get the impression this was sort of like a build-up. And now it's going to be this sort of little group of misfits on the run from the authorities.
I really, really like this. This is about as far out as my comfort zone on TV as I've ever been, probably. But I enjoyed it, and I'm interested now to see whether, because as you say, I imagine, although you can never second guess these sort of things, I imagine it'll be them as a group huddled together trying to escape all these people that are after them and learning more about what each one of them can do. I'll be interested to see whether I'm still as invested in episode 2. Had this been on an Amazon or a Netflix, I would have watched episode 2 just to get a feel
I might have done going. It is a little bit out of my comfort zone, maybe not as much as you, because I do know these characters. I mean, I really like the X-Men Days of Future Past film, which was Matthew Vaughn directed that, and Jane Goldman, Mrs. Jonathan Ross wrote it. That was probably my favourite the X-Men films that I've seen. This had its strengths, but I did struggle with the sort of constant shifting of the narrative. And
to be fair, that's something I always bemoan. I always go.
But it wasn't the same. It wasn't in the same vein as a lot of the UK shows where it's like one scene. It was more like it was to do with the character. There was a reason for it in this. Because the character never placed what time he was in. It almost happened too much for me. It's very jarring. You can never sort of, not relax into it, but you could just, I like to know where I am occasionally, and spoiler alert, if you haven't
us
seen
on
it.
His journey, though, really.
Yeah. So it's interesting, but I'm on the fence.
I'm going to stick with it at least to episode 2 because I was intrigued. Now, if it goes, I know you could already say it's silly, in some ways.
I wouldn't say silly. I mean, I think this is the most grounded you could have, like a show based on a comic. I mean, as you said, we haven't watched like any of the Netflix ones, so I don't know. We haven't got like a frame of reference that Gary would have. But I would certainly say this was a lot more grounded than it could have been. And I did enjoy it. Now talking about it, I think there are more elements that I think I enjoy more so than I did.
I just found yourself that you're
but I just found it. I did find it a real struggle. For example, the 6th episode, No Offense. I watched that yesterday as well, and I was really, really, it got me all the way. I couldn't stop watching it. Whereas this,
you could when it ended. You were immersed in that. You were not.
I mean, I know it's like a 6th episode of a second series, so you've got a lot more. You're a lot more invested in the characters, but I think you had to do a lot of work. I know we say, we don't like being spoon-fed, but this was something where I just struggled to sort of get into it because there were so many, like, little things that
But
jump.
the words a lot of the US critics who've loved it have described it. We haven't used this phrase yet, but it was trippy. That's the word they used a lot. It moved around. It was jerky. I thought it was something a bit different. I thought it just showed that. I loved all the colours of it, and I loved that to use what I think Gary would say, having listened back to some of the things he either say, I like that I know where it's going, or I like that I don't know where it's going, or I don't like that I don't know where it's going.
I think
So,
again, this might be like
things.
the thing with Peaky Blinders where you liked it and I didn't. The sort of over stylized nature of some things takes me out of the world a little bit.
I can appreciate that. I suppose I went in there with no expectations at all.
Yeah, I don't think I did either.
There is every chance that I could have got like 15, 20 minutes into this and gone, no, it's too much. I just can't. And for some reason, it just never happened. I was.
Yeah, see, I got to that point, and
what was it that I know that you're always quite loyal to our conversations and you will watch it because
that's mainly
we're talking about. There must have been a tiny turning point, otherwise it would have been a real slog.
I don't know. I don't know what the turning point was, but after a while I still struggle with the narrative structure of it, but I think after a while you just sort of.
But they won't do that, you'd presume, in the rest, or do you think they will?
They might do. I think that's the character, though, isn't it? Because he's sort of like struggling to control his powers, so he never quite knows where.
You know, I'm not that keen on watching something like Inception, but whereas you watch that, for
maybe because Inception, you know, you're going to be done in 2 hours. I think because it's a TV show, you know, they're stringing out the concept a bit more than they would if it was a movie.
Okay, interesting point.